until years after. So yes, it was a huge experimentation, especially because when I started, there were not a lot of resources on how to do this. And in fact, before like the actual molds for resin, I used to use like just cake molds, and so the cake molds would get distorted just because they're not meant to be created for something so rigid and strong like this. So again, it was like a huge trial and error, but it wasn't until almost 2 years that I was able to quit my job and start hiring people. And I would say that I am where I am today and being able to serve so many people and create these beautiful pieces because of the team that I have today.
Andrea is the lead visionary behind DB Andrea. Her journey into flower preservation began in 2016 after receiving a beautiful Valentine's Day bouquet from her then boyfriend, now husband, Justin. What started as a personal passion quickly grew into a pursuit of excellence as she honed her craft and transformed it into an art form. Today, Andrea leads the DB Andrea team in delivering world-class flower preservation and an exceptional client experience. In addition to her work at DB Andrea, she's deeply involved in the wedding industry as a director of marketing and communications for the WIPA Dallas-Fort Worth chapter, where she's committed to building community and fostering meaningful connections among wedding professionals in the Dallas area and throughout the country. Let's unravel the fingerprints on success of Andrea Cole. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Fingerprints on Success. I'm here today with Andrea Cole. Andrea, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
It's our pleasure. So, DB Andrea, tell us a little bit about your company in the flower preservation business. Tell us first, what is it and how did you come about to start this entrepreneurial endeavor?
Yeah, so flower preservation is basically, as you read it, as you say it, is preserving flowers, preserving something that was once alive in the best shape, that it actually looks like it's still alive, but obviously it's not. So I started preserving flowers back in 2016, so almost 9.5 years ago, after I received a beautiful bouquet from my now husband. I learned that his grandmother used to press flowers in books. I found a book in the library with a big pansy like this big, and it was completely brown, but I had no idea that you could actually do that. And so I started just doing art here and there on the side, just because I've always found myself very creative. But it wasn't until I started preserving bridal bouquets, for the most part, that I found myself the true fashion.
Well, that's cool. So when you decided to go into business, tell me how that gets started, right? So like usually you have an idea or something pops into your mind, but I always love hearing the stories of our entrepreneurs of how does something go from an interest or an idea to a business? Like, how do you get it going?
Yeah. So I preserved the very first project I did. I was really into fashion and I did 3 different sketches of just like random fashion sketches. And I put the flowers as if they were part of their dresses. And again, I just made this out of fun. My husband came to the house and he saw that and he's like, well, you could sell that. So I basically put it on Facebook and Instagram, like just my personal. And I started getting inquiries from friends and family members. And it was kind of like, a lot of people and entrepreneurs say this, it was not planned for me to go to business and start doing this. However, within a week, people were so interested in it that I created my own website. I started selling on Etsy. So it was by accident in a way. And I just could not believe that people were going to pay me to do something that I loved to do so much, just creating art out of, my fingers, my hands, and just my creativity.
So did you, in the beginning stage, are you doing all this preservation yourself? I noticed like that what you showed me there looked like almost like lucite, right? Like, was this something that you were able to do, on your own? You had the tools of the trade, so to speak, to do it?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. You should see my projects when I very first started. Pressing flowers is, it's pretty easy. Of course, the flowers lose colors and there's a lot of, trial and error and stuff like that. And that's how I started. I didn't actually start preserving flowers in resin, which is what you said is very similar to lysite. And it's kind of like a hard plastic. It almost looks like glass, but it's not quite as heavy. But I didn't start doing this until years after. So yes, it was a huge experimentation, especially because when I started, there were not a lot of resources on how to do this. And in fact, before like the actual molds for resin, I used to use like just cake molds, and so the cake molds would get distorted just because they're not meant to be created for something so rigid and strong like this. So again, it was like a huge trial and error, but it wasn't until almost 2 years that I was able to quit my job and start hiring people. And I would say that I am where I am today and being able to serve so many people and create these beautiful pieces because of the team that I have today.
Oh, it's great. Now, how many customers do you serve?
So we serve about 1,000 customers, clients per year, and they can get something this small, or they can get a huge, combo of pressed art, pressed flower art, and then resin as well. So it varies a lot, but yeah, 1,000 customers per year.
That's incredible. And you still, so your team is doing the actual work. It's not like this is outsourced to some other company. This is all done internally with your team servicing 1,000 people a year.
Yes, that's correct. From the moment that we receive your flowers to the moment that we're communicating with you until 4 to 6 months later when you're receiving back your preserved piece.
That's great. So that's a whole nother skill, right? As an entrepreneur, which is going from where it's you're the chief cook and bottle washer, you're doing everything, to now you start bringing people on and start growing your team. How have you found that transition to going from kind of business owner to leader and business owner?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you are the one creating the art and you're talking to the customers and it's your baby, you really don't want to let things go. Like it was really hard for me when I hired my first employee, and she was just helping me pack prints. And I was like, well, why would she do it if I can do it faster or better, And I quickly learned that if somebody can do what I do at least 80% fine, then I should definitely hire someone else to help me. It wasn't until I hired my first artist that I had such a hard time letting go. I was like, that is my part. And honestly, today, if I can be truthful, is I barely do the work myself. Like I am growing the business. I'm doing the marketing. Of course, I work on projects here and there, but I have been able to today hire skill set professionals and artists that have so much experience in different fields that have a lot to do with what they're doing today, that are making us grow as fast as we are, as opposed to in the beginning, I was just trying to hire somebody from college, or a stay-at-home mom that didn't have much to do and stuff like that. So it's definitely a huge, and I want people to know this. Yes, you can hire, of course, all those people, and that's perfectly fine. However, you're never going to grow as fast as you want to unless you hire experts.
Yeah. And giving them the ability to do what they do. You can't micromanage everything, which is,
Yes.
So you talked about that your transition from kind of not only developing the vision and the sales, but doing the work, to building out a team and doing less or none of the actual creative piece as much anymore. Talk about that transition to being more of a CEO entrepreneur. What have you found to be I guess, what do you like the most about it? What have been the biggest challenges?
Yeah. So going back to my team, as I mentioned earlier, of course, the girls I hired have not had any experience preserving flowers. As I said, it's becoming more and more common. I hire people that have experience in the wedding industry, for instance, or people that have a lot of experience painting and being artists, or people that have worked with resin prior to working with us. So in the very beginning, I basically trained everybody to do what I do. And to be honest, now that they're fully trained, they have done many pieces than I have. And I love it when I see something that they do and I'm like, I don't think that I could have pulled that off. I perhaps gave them the vision, but the fact that, as you said, I'm not micromanaging them, I don't think that they would be happy if I did, or myself would be happy if I was basically doing that to them. So I think that the whole part of having a whole team is really fun, because you need to trust them. But again, you need to obviously hire the right people.
Yeah. And so you talked about rapid growth and, a lot of times, the people who listen to our show tend to be entrepreneurs and people that work in the entrepreneurial world, and everyone loves to talk about scaling because I think people find that to be kind of like the magic thing, right? You've got a great business or great business idea, but how do you take it from a little business to a big business? And you said that you've been focusing on that. Tell us a little bit about how you've been successful scaling your company.
Yeah, I definitely will touch base on that. I definitely want to say also that it's a lot easier to scale up than scale down. And unfortunately, I had no idea. My business was growing, like it was doubling in sales. It was doubling in the people, how many people we're serving, that I just thought that it was going to continue to be a linear growth. And to my surprise, it wasn't that way. And no business is that way, truly, so there's just growth overall is just not linear. So you have to be very careful. And this is something that I would love to tell any entrepreneur, like, yes, scaling is absolutely easy, and when I started, as I said, I was, creating just art here and there. Later, I started serving brides, but then COVID happened and most people were not getting married. They pushed their weddings. And what happened is that nobody got married, or most people didn't get married until 2020, but they pushed their weddings to 2021 and 2022. So those 2 years, I skyrocketed. I mean, we were in so much demand that I could not keep up. Now, what happened in 2023 is that things start settling. By that time, I had bought a building with my husband. He's downstairs, I'm on the second floor. We hired all these people. Back then, we had a team of 18 people. Right now, we have a team of 9 that are our core team members. And so again, scaling back was one of the hardest things that I've ever done, because I didn't understand that you have to be prepared to scale down. Like how can you not increase your pricing quarter after quarter when you did for so many years? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you find you get most of your business? I mean, your marketing and business development aspect, because that's, so many businesses differ in so many ways. How do you grow your clientele and in terms of developing actual customers?
So in the very beginning, it was very easy. Instagram was like you would post consistently and you would get orders. And then I realized that if you spend $10, you would get a 10x on your investment, 10 to 20. So it was something insane. So the more I spent, the more I got customers. And that's how basically it took off, right? Word of mouth is something super important as well, of course. The thing is that Instagram is not today what it used to be before. And so if you're spending, again, $10, your return investment, if you're lucky, is probably those $10, which is not that great. So things definitely change. I think, becoming or working on your brand is so important, because once you have established yourself as a company that people trust, as somebody that is going to finish the work and is going to do it right no matter what, I think that trust is something very important that people need to understand, especially if you're working in your brand.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my guests that I had on, who's also a client of the firm, was the founder of Tumi Luggage, the famous luggage company.
Wow.
And he talked about trust. And because I asked him the question, Tumi, of course, is now a worldwide brand, and you can buy it in any major store and every airport and so on. And he talked about trust. He said, because the transition from large to enormous company, he said, came when it became a trusted brand where people knew it was quality.
Yes.
And that it was a company that stood behind the product, so that people would tell stories. Oh, I had a problem with my Tumi luggage. They sent me brand new luggage. They immediately took care of it. Yep. So that in essence, in a massive word of mouth fashion spread, and the brand just started to grow and grow exponentially, because they built that trust factor that you could trust it was a high quality product with a company that stood behind the product. So kind of interesting to hear you use the same exact word, because that has come up not just in the case of Tumi, but in other conversations in terms of building that brand, because you kind of only get one shot at that, right? In terms of you're going to get one shot at building a brand, and it can go the opposite way too, which obviously is what we don't want.
Yeah, truly. And
would you say? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, you're good. I was gonna say I just wish that so many people know, like, if they can have an amazing product, but the service needs to be equally as great. The customer service, how you made that person feel when they came to you to ask. Sometimes they will say like, "Oh, this is a dumb question." Well, it's not a dumb question if you just obviously don't know enough. So educating those clients and making them feel like they can trust you, and knowing that you got your back, like their back. I'm sorry. Like, again, if you go back and read our Google reviews, we've worked hard to make sure that those clients feel like they were our only client. That is kind of like, honestly, something that I love doing. We may preserve 1,000 bouquets per year, but for that client, it's going to be that one. They perhaps may come back and say like, "Hey, you know what? I have my sister's wedding coming up, or I had a memorial that I have to, I want to preserve flowers for." But for the most part, it's just going to be that one shot. So we want to make sure that it's a great experience, and of course that it reflects on the product that they're getting. That whenever they see their product, they're not just remembering their special day, but the whole experience working with us as well.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it too, about how every customer has to feel like the only customer or the most important customer, and it's like that in any business. I when I train young lawyers who work for me and service the entrepreneurs that we work with, I always tell them, like, remember, to each person that you're handling, the thing you're doing is the single most important thing that you could be working on, because nobody is coming to us because they just love spending money on attorneys, right? They're coming to us because they need us. They need our help on something, or they're trying to pursue an opportunity and they need assistance capturing the opportunity, whatever it may be, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It has to be the most important thing, because to them it is. And, the kiss of death is when anyone in a business tells a customer, "Oh, I'll get to that after this big thing I have to do," or whatever. You just destroyed yourself, right?
100%,
at that moment.
Yes. Yeah. You can't make excuses. And it's one of those things, like when I have a team now, if somebody gets sick, if I have 5 people sick, our clients will never know. They shouldn't know. They shouldn't get stressed about if somebody's not working. They need to know that we're going to take care of them, and they're going to receive the piece within the range that we gave them, regardless of what's happening behind the scenes. And I'm glad you mentioned that too.
Yeah, because the fact that you might have some other bigger project going on, well, guess what? In their universe, theirs is the biggest and most important project, and they don't really care about whatever else is going on. And in fact, it's almost insulting when you suggest that there's something more important.
100%.
But it's incredible how often businesses, or at least in the customer service experience, people are not taught to understand that how the consumer thinks. It's really you see people make that mistake over and over. So let me ask you, when you reflect on your journey so far, which has obviously been very successful, and you have a growing business, do you think that you've had certain ways of thinking or mindsets that when you think about it, you say, it's because I've approached things this way, or I have this belief that I think it's made me more successful?
Going back to everything that we spoke about, having your client's best interest in mind, this is something that everybody in my office knows. They have to feel like we do have their best interest at heart. Once you have that trust, and going back to the trust, once you have that trust, it's so much easier to do whatever you want, right? And again, this means that perhaps somebody is coming for something very small, and that's all they want, and not because you didn't sell them X amount means that was a failure. That means that they came for something, they didn't want to be, oversold, and they're happy with what they got. So again, trying to keep that mindset is so important, and it's something that they all know, because again, it's one of those things, like the girls would send me a design like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I'm like, "Would you pay this much for that design?" No. If you think that you won't, then you need to redo it. Until you're like, "I'm obsessed with what is going on here," then you're doing the right thing.
That's such a great answer. That It's funny. I'm smiling because you're reminding me of a lot of things, very similar philosophies about. I always say to people, when you deliver the work product to the client, is it a product that you would take your checkbook out and be happy to write a check for the deliverable because the value was there? And if the answer is that you'd have a hard time paying it, then you didn't provide a good deliverable, right?
Yes, and I honestly don't know how some people sell something that they don't believe in, because once you believe in your product and service and you're certain that is the best out there, it's just so easy to not even sell, just to like have a conversation about it, and people just trust that you're gonna do, a beautiful piece, and they want more. But that just comes from, again, having your client's best interest, and for them to realize that at the very, very beginning.
What are some things, no entrepreneurial journey is just, perfect all the way. There's always challenges, hiccups, bumps in the road. What are some things that when you think back, you say to yourself, okay, like if I could advise myself, today, advise myself a couple of years ago, what are some of the things you wouldn't do again, or that you would advise entrepreneurs to avoid doing that were mistakes along the way?
Yeah, I was actually very excited to talk to you because of your background. Ever since I hired my first artist, I had a non-compete and non-disclosure contract right away. And people would sign it. Perhaps they wouldn't understand it, but they wouldn't ask more questions. So one of the things I learned the hard way is that I had somebody come work with me for 6 weeks. But right after she had signed that contract, the very next day, she opened a business to compete with me here in Dallas, Texas. Oh, yeah. And so again, being something so like, this is not just like car sales, that you may have that experience for your whole life, and you're just jumping to another company because that is what you do. That is what you've learned to do. This is something totally unique that they've learned with me. And so I don't know, I had my contract for whatever reason signed, and the very next day competing with me. 6 months later, this person hadn't worked with me anymore, and I had no idea she was one of my biggest competitors until way later. And back then it was COVID, so I hired her when she was wearing a mask the whole time. And it's crazy how that can happen so fast. So having a lawyer and somebody who can guide you through all that process is so critical. And I think people must understand the contracts, whether you are the person who's giving that contract to the employee or you're the employee signing it. Unfortunately, this for me was a $100,000 lawsuit against this person. She went out of business, but I did not see a single penny back from my losses,
Yeah, that's an unbelievable story. So she was actually building a competitive business while on your payroll, while working for you.
The very next day. Yes.
That's just incredible. I mean, and I've seen in 26 years of being a lawyer to entrepreneurs, believe me, I've seen a lot, and I've seen a lot of violations of non-competes. Generally speaking, someone doesn't start the competitive business the minute they start working for you. Usually they do it at some point later. So that's kind of a remarkable story. And I guess at the end of the day, the non-compete held up, which is good. But a lot of times it's really about stopping the competitor versus actually recouping the damages. Sometimes it's very hard to accomplish both.
That's correct. Yeah. So again, I'm just glad we're talking, because I think I tell this to all my competitors. Some of them are friends, right? But if I talk to them, like, if you're going to hire somebody, just have something in place, and of course it needs to be enforceable for both parties, so you can't just say like, oh, you cannot do this ever again. But if it's within a certain mile radius and it's online, it does apply. So people need to be aware of that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, because I always tell people too that when they'll say, oh yeah, I've got that covered, and I always remind them restrictions also go to reasonableness, right? The employer can't just restrict someone in a way that's more restriction than they actually require in order to protect their interests. And it can't be overreaching, or you could end up getting the whole thing thrown out.
Correct.
Which of course defeats the purpose. So, along the way, would you say, and I don't know your background prior to launching the business, but tell me a little bit about some mentors maybe that you had along the way? I mean, our show, as you know, is called Fingerprints on Success. And I came up with that title for a reason, because I always like to not only hear these wonderful entrepreneurial journeys and stories, but I love to talk about people who made a difference. As entrepreneurs, we get to make a difference in the lives of a lot of people. But usually there's people who have fingerprints on our success along the way. Share with us, kind of some of your mentors or, people that made an influence on you that helped you with your success.
Yeah, so I will say my husband has been my biggest inspiration. He has been an entrepreneur ever since he was in college, and I've always had it in my veins. I mean, my mother was an entrepreneur as well. So again, selling and creating all the marketing materials for something was very natural to me. However, there was a lot of guidance. Having somebody, whether that is your husband or a friend or truly just a paid mentor, is so crucial, because yes, of course you can navigate everything by trial and error, but having somebody that you can, bounce ideas around, get a second opinion, understanding that you're not the one that knows the most is so crucial. So again, my husband has probably been the most helpful for this entire journey. Like, in fact, we have a lawyer meeting at 4:00. We got a demand letter from using cookies or not using cookies properly back in 2016, which again, this is when I just launched my website. So I had no idea. So 6, 7, 8 years later, I get this demand letter from somewhere in California, and guess who's going to be on the call? My husband, So definitely have a mentor. It's so, so crucial.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the most important things you learned
from having a mentor?
Sure. In terms of the impact that it made, whether it was your mother or your husband, what are the things that you think made the biggest impact on you?
Resilience.
I'm trying to dig into that emotion, Andrea. I want to get into what makes you tick. Who are you?
Being an entrepreneur, of course, you know this yourself, it's not all flowers and beautiful pieces, and it's not all butterflies and happiness. It's not, burnout is real. You have days that you just don't want to show up. And when you have somebody that relies on you and knows that you are going to show up, it's almost like owing that to someone else, even if they have absolutely nothing to do with your business. You don't want to be ashamed and say I just didn't feel like working today. And so again, whether that is a friend or a paid mentor, you almost have to report back to that person. So I would say that has probably been one of the reasons why I have loved the most being able to bounce ideas, because I feel like I need to, but next time I talk to them, I need to tell them whether I grew, something made me grow, or something didn't go right and what I learned. But it's always that interaction and kind of reporting back that I look forward to.
Yeah. You said your mother was also an entrepreneur. What business was she in?
So she's in Mexico, and she does, it's kind of interesting. I don't think she would have chosen this. It was kind of give it to her, but she is in the gasoline business. So she does testing for the tanks down below the ground to make sure that they don't have any leaks and stuff like that. So of course she's not the one going inside of the tank. She has a team that does that, but she's been doing this for, oh my gosh, I think 30 something years. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, a few of my uncles own a lot of gas stations, and I think it was the early 90s when there was a big explosion in Ciudad Juarez. And after that explosion, because of a leak, now every gas station has to have those tests done once or twice per year, depending on how old those gas stations are. So anyways, it kind of fell into her hands, and then she just ran with it. And that's basically what she does. And it's a lot of work. It's pretty stressful sometimes.
Yeah. And a business, obviously, that's always going to be in need because it's required and it's a critical, obviously critical safety business. What do you think you learned the most from watching your mom? I mean, I would imagine that made a big influence on you, especially, in Mexico. And I don't know your mom's exact age, but at the time she was coming along, I would imagine not an easy journey for a young woman in Mexico to be a serial entrepreneur and build a business like that. What do you think you learned most from watching your mom?
Yeah, especially, as a woman in that particular industry, I mean, she's probably one of the only few,
I'm sure.
Yeah. So I honestly think resilience, I don't ever recall my mom being super stressed out for things that were happening. Of course, now that I'm mature enough to talk to her and understand her journey, she just would not share it with us. So sometimes that helps me a lot whenever I'm super stressed out for whatever reason, just to kind of like take a step back and think, hey, if I'm talking about the problem so much, maybe I'm the one making the problem even bigger, And going back to my mom's journey, I just never heard her complain. I never saw her cry if she did cry. So something to keep in mind a lot.
Yeah. So a real leader,
Yes.
because that's, leadership is, never, as they say, never let them see you sweat. Right.
Right.
And that's a kind of that's actually a really big trait and something interesting. And that's a great story. I mean, she was really a trailblazer, especially in a very male dominated business, which is really cool. Tell me what's got you excited about the future. What's kind of hot on your plate right now that you're fired up about when you get up every day?
Yeah, Bill, it's funny. Like whenever you create something kind of like from scratch and very unique, people will have competitors and you don't understand how much they can copy you from your own photos. We have this happen all the time, like they take our own photos and compete with us with our products at a much lower cost. And we see this, I kid you not, weekly. On a weekly basis, something like that is happening. Somebody would take our captions and copy them. And I mean, it can be pretty draining and it can be exhausting to be basically fighting that from happening. However, keeping in mind that competitors also make you push forward is so crucial and keeps you on your toes and keeps you innovating. Because once you wear the biggest company in the world for some particular reason, regardless if 100 more competitors start doing exactly what you're doing, is what are you going to do to keep that, to continue to be number one, to continue to be innovating and to not lose sight. People can get very comfortable. Everybody does, I myself too. If I didn't have those competitors kind of like pushing, I feel like I would just have continued to do the same thing over and over. Whereas right now is always pushing forward, seeing what else we can introduce that nobody's doing. So I always feel now that I like looking back and after so many years, I've learned if somebody's doing it and continue to doing it better, then we need to push forward and do something else. And that to me is one of the most exciting things, where we keep innovating and launching things that nobody had seen before.
So what's hot on your plate right now? What's the latest and greatest?
So we actually have, I don't think I have that with me right now, but it's kind of like a tiny little mini bouquet. So we take your bouquet and of course, like we press everything, right? Like petal by petal a flower, and then we reconstruct it, put it back together. So what we're doing with a piece about this big is recreate your whole bouquet with tiny little bits of your own petals. So we're like literally cutting from a petal like this big, a petal like that tiny to recreate that flower. It's called like the mosaic one. And we're basically making it with, it's obviously looking down and with tweezers. And then, it's really incredible. It's like a Barbie bouquet. It's really fun.
That is very cool. Well, Andrea, I want to just thank you for your time today and coming on the show. We're going to love following the continuation of your entrepreneurial journey as you can continue to grow your company. And thanks for being a guest on Fingerprints on Success today.
Thank you so much for your time. This was lovely.